You're too old to ski anyway, Mom. We'll take it from here. That's what my daughter told me on Christmas morning. While snow fell soft outside and the cranberry bread still sat warm on the counter, I didn't scream, didn't cry. I simply reached for my phone and dialed the resort. Hi, this is Mildred Hargrove. Cancel everything. If you're watching this, drop your city in the comments, dear. And tell me, would you have canceled too? My name is Mildred. I'm 68 years old, a retired school teacher from Ashwood, Oregon. For most of my life, I believed that love meant giving time, money, second chances. I thought, if I just gave enough, they'd remember me when it mattered. This year, I cashed out part of my land sale, booked the whole Lake Tahoe trip, resort chalets, ski passes, private chef, to 18,420. Every detail planned to make Christmas magical for them. Erica, my only daughter. Tom, her husband, who calls me Ma when he wants something. And the kids, Jude and Lainey, who used to jump into my arms like I was Santa himself. I baked snowball cookies that night, wrapped little fleece blankets for the kids, printed their names on the tags with that glitter pen Erica once gave me back in college. Everything was packed, even my thermals and my book for the train ride. And then 7:08 a.m., a text buzzed on my nightstand. Just one sentence. Mom, it's just gonna be us this year, hope you understand. I stared at the screen. The message hung there, like mistletoe over an empty doorframe. No apology, no call, the words, just us, looped in my mind, as if I wasn't even part of us anymore. I opened my travel folder. My name was on every single reservation, not theirs, mine. For a moment I thought, maybe they made a mistake. Maybe the kids would call and say, Grandma, we want you there. But what I got was silence. And when I checked the shared calendar, I'd been removed. I wasn't just left behind. I was edited out. The cranberry bread started to cool. Its cinnamon scent filled the kitchen, but no one would come for it. No one would ask, did you bring the syrup? No one would say, this tastes like childhood. I looked out at the porch where Tom once helped me shovel snow, and I felt it, that aching weight being useful only when needed. So I called the resort, and I canceled everything. Spa, ski lessons, chef gone. And in that moment, I didn't feel petty. I felt clear. They chose to leave me. I chose not to fund their fun. I sat back in my chair, hands folded, heart pounding steady like a slow hymn. And that's when I whispered to myself, you're not old, Mildred. You're just finally done being invisible. They thought I'd just stay home and sulk. But I had a second folder, one they didn't know about. What would you do if your family erased you on Christmas? Forgive and wait? Or cancel and walk away? If your family texted you out of your own trip, would you still send gifts? Or shut the door? The day I decided to book that trip, I had just come home from the dentist. 2 root canals in one sitting. But I still stopped by the bakery. Jude loved their almond croissants. I remember holding that pink paper box on my lap, watching the steam fog up my windshield, thinking this is what being a mom is. Pain errands and remembering who likes what. That night, I pulled out my old recipe binder, the one with coffee stains and fading ink. The last tab was labeled Holiday Dreams. It was full of ideas. Winter cabin rentals I couldn't afford in my 40s. Clipped photos of snowy porches and cocoa bars. Handwritten next to, someday, when Erica remarries, maybe this? I'd forgotten I wrote that. Tom wasn't my first pick, but when Erica called me after her divorce, voice trembling, asking if she and the kids could move back in, I said yes without blinking. They stayed in my house for 13 months. I covered groceries, daycare pickups, even helped Erica land her new job. I remember pressing her blouse the morning of her first interview, slipping a little lavender sachet in her purse, just something small to remind her someone believed in her. And when Tom showed up again, with flowers and promises, I bit my tongue. I wanted her to have love, even if I didn't trust the wrapping. So when the wedding came, I wrote the check. $27,000. Mom, she said, crying, you didn't have to? Of course I did. That's what we do, don't we? We give. We hope it comes back as love, but it doesn't always. And sometimes, it returns as a text message on Christmas morning, with no punctuation, no warmth, just, it's best if we go as a nuclear family this year. Nuclear. Like I was some foreign object. Something dangerous that needed to be removed. I sat at the edge of my bed, feeling the words settle like snow in all the spaces I once thought were safe. I didn't reply to her message. Didn't type okay, didn't ask why. Instead, I went downstairs and made coffee, the kind Erica liked when she was 12, cinnamon and a splash of cream. She used to say it tasted like hugs. The mug steamed in my hands. I sat by the window, watching the frost melt on the glass, remembering a time when silence in this house meant peace, not absence. The calendar still showed December 25 in bold red letters. The same day I used to tape glitter stars to Erica's door so she'd wake up Hunder magic. Now, that same girl left me with a 6-word message and a suitcase packed for no one. I glanced at the presents under the tree, all wrapped, all labeled. To Jude, with love from Grandma. To Lainey, may your smile never fade. To Erica, just, to my daughter. No frills, no ribbon, just hope folded neatly beneath the bow. I should have known. Maybe I did. Maybe there were signs, like last Thanksgiving when Tom joked about how generous I was, but never once said thank you. Or Erica brushing off my offer to bake. No offense, Mom, but the store-bought pies are easier. Or the way the kids had started calling me Mimi instead of Grandma, because Lainey's friend said it sounded younger. At first, I smiled, told myself it was fine. Times change, I said, but deep down I knew. You can feel when you're being quietly replaced. You can feel when love becomes convenience. I thought about the vacation folder again. Not the one I used to cancel their trip. The other one. The one marked Plan B. I stood up, set my mug down, and walked to the hallway closet. Past the scarves, past the board games, at the very back a leather pouch, zipped tight. Inside a train ticket, one way, Florence, Oregon, departure December 27. It wasn't a big plan. Just a reset. There was a small bookshop by the coast, run by an old colleague of mine. She'd emailed last month, offering me the spare room above the shop if I ever needed an escape. At the time, I smiled. Now I called her back. She picked up on the first ring. Mildred, you okay? I think I'm ready to learn how to rest, I said, instead of rescue. Well then, she replied, pack light. I've already fluffed the pillows. And just like that, I had somewhere to go that didn't require me to beg for belonging. She didn't even block me. That's how I saw it, the photos. 4 of them lined up in matching red flannel pajamas by the fireplace at the cabin I booked. Erica, Tom, Jude, and Lainey, all grinning like they'd finally gotten what they wanted, a Christmas without me. The caption read, finally, a peaceful holiday. Just us 4. I blinked. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I scrolled. Another photo. Jude holding a marshmallow stick by the bonfire. Lainey wearing the ski goggles I gave her last year. Comments poured in. This is perfect. Wait, no grandma this year? Erica, your mom's not there. And then hers. Right under it. With that same chirpy tone I used to find sweet before I learned what was underneath. She needed rest. You know how it is. I sat on the couch for a full minute. Breathing, not crying, just adjusting. That emoji, the half smirk, it felt louder than any scream. Rest, that's what they called erasing me now. I opened Facebook, went to the page Erica manages for her parenting blog. I clicked unfollow, clicked or like. I didn't slam the door. I just closed it. Then I opened Tom's profile. He'd posted a video Jude zooming down a bunny slope. Caption, so proud of our little skier. No mention of who paid for the gear, or the lessons, or the entire lodge. I clicked mute. Not because I was angry, because I was done pretending I belonged in their world. Behind me, the tree lights blinked. Soft, rhythmic, like they were breathing. Alive. I stood up and walked to the hallway wall. The big photo still hung there. All of us at Erica's wedding. Tom's hand on my shoulder. Jude holding my wrist like I was the prize. I lifted the frame. It was heavier than I remembered. Or maybe I was just tired. I didn't smash it. Didn't burn it. I just slid it into the drawer beneath the hallway table, right beside an envelope I hadn't opened in years. The handwriting made my chest throb. It was David's, my husband, gone 7 winters now. He had written it during his last hospital stay. I used to reread it every December. Then I stopped. But that night, with the house silent and the taste of betrayal still warm, I pulled the flap open. His words came out like breath held too long. If they ever forget what you're worth, don't let them turn you into a ghost. I pressed the page against my chest, and for the first time that day I wept. Not because they left, but because I almost forgot who I was before they taught me to disappear. I didn't post anything that day, didn't make a statement, didn't write one of those sad, reflecting on the holidays, captions like people my age tend to do. I simply logged out. Then I opened my phone's gallery and scrolled through the favorites album. It used to be full of them. Jude's missing teeth smile, Lainey in her fairy wings, Erica holding a pie I helped her bake before she forgot how to thank me. I tapped remove from favorites, one by one. Not with hate, with grief. A slow, quiet goodbye. Next was the group chat. Family holiday planning Hargrove House. I hadn't said a word in it in weeks. Not since they started sending updates without me. Choosing dates, sending links, coordinating ski rentals as if I didn't exist. I opened it, stared at Erica's last message. Everyone confirm if you're bringing your own sleds. I tapped, leave group. No announcement. Just left. Then I opened notes, typed, living is not a tantrum, it's a decision. And I locked the phone. Later that afternoon, I went down to the garage. The light flickered. The air smelled like cardboard and dust. It had been years since I touched the bends along the far wall. I pulled out one labeled, keepsakes, inside crayon drawings, old birthday cards, a Father's Day craft Erica made for David with popsicle sticks and glue blobs. Beneath it, a tiny envelope. I recognized the glitter pen, the one she used in college. The card inside said, Mom is my hero. I want to be just like you when I grow up. Erica, age 8, I sat on the cold floor, card still in my lap. And I smiled, not because it was sweet, but because I remembered who I was. Before they made me feel like clutter, I didn't burn anything, didn't tear the memories. I placed them back in the bin, closed the lid, and wrote a new label, kept, but no longer needed. Upstairs, the tree still glowed. A few pine needles had dropped, gathering in little clusters on the rug. I turned on the lamp, pulled out the train itinerary from the side drawer. Florence was still circled in red. But this time, I grabbed a pen and added one more stop midway. Eugene. Why? I wasn't sure. Only that something inside me wanted to pass through old ground before stepping into anything new. And that felt like power. I hadn't planned to open the banking app. Honestly, I just wanted to check if my pension hit on time. The train was leaving the next day, and I wanted to make sure my hotel card wouldn't bounce. But something caught my eye. A withdrawal, Blue Lotters $250, from the house repair fund, dated December 18th. That account wasn't touched in over a year. I kept it for emergencies, like replacing the boiler or fixing the roof. And only 2 people knew about it, me and Erica. She'd asked for access once, when the garage door broke and Tom was between jobs. I promise I won't touch it, Mom. Just in case something happens when you're out of town, she said, her voice sweet and flat. I believed her. I always did. But that withdrawal wasn't an accident. It wasn't scheduled. And it definitely wasn't approved. I scrolled back. There it was again, November 22nd, door 980. October 3rd, 600 hits, 3 months, 3 silences. I opened the transfer details. My heart didn't race, not yet. It just steadied itself. Recipient Erica T. Hargrove memo. Miss, like I was a storage bin. A drawer. An afterthought. I stared at the screen, not with rage. With clarity. She hadn't needed my permission. Because I'd already given her everything. The access. The benefit of the doubt. The space to believe she would never use me like this. But she had. And now I knew. I sat in the kitchen, phone resting on the placemat beside a half-eaten slice of banana bread. The same kind I used to pack in her school lunches, with little sticky notes that said, "You've got this, superstar." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it wasn't new. This wasn't the first time she'd taken something and called it love. It just happened to be the first time I noticed. I opened the laptop, typed in the old master password, Daisy Sevens and David, her childhood dog. My late husband still worked. I clicked through the folders, financial, medical, insurance. Every detail I'd ever saved for her sake. Then I clicked export transactions, all of them, 3 years' worth. I didn't know what I was looking for yet. But I knew this, if she erased me from her Christmas, I would erase her from my silence. Starting now. The file finished downloading. I saved it to a flash drive I hadn't touched in years. The blue one with a chipped corner and a sticker that said, Luna's third B-Day why? It felt fitting to store evidence inside something once meant for memories. I poured myself some tea, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened the spreadsheet. Rouse dates. Names. Most of it looked normal. Bill's grocery runs. A few donations I'd forgotten I'd made. Then I saw it. May 9th. A transfer of $3,200 to Tom's business account. Loan temporary. The memo read, I never loaned them money. I supported. But a loan meant expectation. Something I never dared demand from family. I checked the account settings. The email notifications were turned off. And the last login, not mine. 2 days before Erica told me I deserved to rest. I pressed my palm to my chest. Not from panic, from recognition. It all clicked. The slow distancing, the shifts in tone, the little digs masked as concern. Mom, you really don't need to keep track of all this. "You're retired." She had prepared for this. Erasing me wasn't an accident. It was convenient. With David gone, she knew I wouldn't question love. She counted on it. That's what stung. Not the money. Not even the trip, but the quiet planning, the betrayal in installments. I closed the laptop. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the dishwasher and the radiator ticking in the corner. I went to the hall closet again, pulled out my old accordion folder, the legal one. Inside, David's will, my property title, a notarized document giving Erica limited access. I flipped to the back pocket, empty. It used to hold the draft of my own will. I'd taken it out 2 months ago to update it. Hadn't put it back. I walked upstairs past the gallery wall, every photo slightly crooked as if the house itself felt unbalanced. In the bedroom drawer under my journal and a faded lavender sachet, there it was. The draft seemed but not filed. Her name's still there. Primary beneficiary, executor. I stared at it. Then, without drama, folded it in half and slipped it into a new envelope. Wrote in red ink, OTOB Rubarite 10. I placed it beside the train ticket, and under that, the printout of every transfer she made. Then I whispered, not with anger but with certainty. "You taught me how to disappear, Erica. Now I'll show you how it feels." The train slid out of Ashwood Station as the sun cracked across the frostbitten rooftops. I didn't wave. There was no one to wave to. Just me, a leather handbag, and a suitcase I'd borrowed from my neighbor years ago and never gave back. The conductor tipped his cap. "Florence, ma'am?" I nodded. Then added, almost as an afterthought, "Eugene first." He raised a brow, but said nothing. My seat was by the window, the kind I always liked, wide glass, so you could watch the world forget you without feeling like it hurt. I sipped from a thermos of mint tea, not sweetened, just warm. The landscape blurred into gray and pine. Eugene came faster than I expected. By then, I'd read only 10 pages of the novel I'd packed, the same one I used to keep by my bed, but never had time to finish between babysitting shifts and baking for PTA fundraisers. The platform was cold. Colder than Ashwood, colder than Florence even. I pulled my scarf tighter, stepped onto the street like I knew where I was going. Truth was, I only half remembered. But my feet knew. The office hadn't changed much. Same red bricks. Same dusty wreath on the door with one crushed pine cone dangling like it had seen better winters. Inside, the scent of paper and peppermint. He looked older, grayer, but still sharp around the eyes. "Well, I'll be Mildred Hargrove." His voice still carried that courtroom confidence. "David would have been proud of how straight you walk." I didn't smile, but I did sit. He poured tea, loose leaf, citrusy. I reached into my bag, pulled out the flash drive, slid it across the table. He didn't ask what was on it, just looked at me the way lawyers do when they're calculating the storm. "What do you want me to do with this?" he asked. I looked out the window. Raindrops had started to streak the glass. Each one caught light then vanished. "If someone quietly took pieces of you," I said, "but left just enough to keep up the illusion of love? Is there a way to take yourself back without dragging them through the dirt?" He leaned back, said nothing for a long while. Finally he nodded. "There is. Pause. But it takes patience and precision." I took another sip of tea. Let it burn a little going down. "Good," I said. "I've got both." And in that small office above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon guilt, a woman in her late 60s started to draw the outline of her own quiet justice. He asked for nothing more. Didn't prod, didn't pity, just took the flash drive, placed it into a folder labeled Estate Hargrove. "I'll need 2 weeks, he said. "Maybe less. But I won't move unless you say so." I nodded. As I stood, he reached into the cabinet behind his desk and pulled out a manila envelope. "David left this with me 10 years ago. Told me to hand it over if you ever came in alone." My fingers hesitated, then took it. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky still hung heavy, gray with the kind of quiet that makes you feel like the world's holding its breath. I walked into the little cafe next door, ordered soup, sat in the corner with the envelope beside my purse, unopened. It was cream-colored, sealed with a wax press I recognized. David's initials. The last time he used it was on our 30th anniversary gift. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I looked around. A couple argued softly in the booth behind me. A toddler dropped his toy on the tile. Life, still going, even without me as the center of anyone's world. I finally peeled back the seal. Inside 2 pages. The first was a letter. David's handwriting, slanted and steady. "If you're reading this, you've already given too much to people who've forgotten how to say thank you. I know you, Mill. You'll keep giving long after the water runs dry. But there's a difference between kindness and being used like a faucet. So if the time ever comes, rewrite everything. And don't leave crumbs behind at the second page, a checklist, titles, accounts, safe deposit box keys. At the bottom, a note, legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you protect on the way out. I folded the papers slowly, pressed them into my purse like scripture. Then I reached for my phone and deleted Erica's contact. Not blocked, not muted, deleted, because ghosts don't need numbers, and I was done being one. That night, in a modest guest room above the law office, I lay beneath a quilt stitched with someone else's memories. But for the first time in weeks, I slept. No dreams, no noise, just quiet. The kind you earn when you stop apologizing for being awake. I wasn't looking for her. Honestly, I was just scrolling, half asleep, waiting for the kettle to boil. But there she was, Erica, on my screen. Her face lit by ring light, wearing that cream sweater I gave her 3 birthdays ago. Today I want to share our holiday traditions, she said, smiling like forgiveness came easy when you were the one holding the knife. The caption read, "How my mother-in-law taught me grace?" I froze. She talked about making pies from scratch, about the value of handwritten cards, about raising children with warm discipline and soft boundaries. I knew those phrases, knew them like I knew the scent of her baby blanket. They were mine, my teachings, my voice, and now attributed to Tom's mother, a woman who never baked a thing in her life and once called me too sentimental for saving Erica's first lost tooth. Erica held up a framed photo, a blurry image of my old kitchen, my backsplash, my curtains. "We grew up in this house," she said. "No matter how little we had, it always felt full." I could still smell that kitchen, lemon oil and coffee, the squeak of the back screen door and Jude's muddy boots on linoleum. She didn't say my name, not once, only we. As if I were some shadow in the corner, too inconvenient to frame. She had taken my words, my memories, and painted over them with someone else's initials. I closed the video, not from anger, from preservation. If I kept watching, I'd forget how my own voice sounded. I stared at the ceiling. The cracks above the guest bed curled like quiet questions. How do you prove you existed when the people who carry your story stop saying it out loud? The next morning, I packed my purse and walked 3 blocks to the street where I grew up. The gate was still there, peeling, familiar. I reached out, ran my fingers across the wood, rough and splintered but real. Inside my bag, copies of property deeds, David's old letters, the envelope labeled VOID. If they wanted to rewrite the past, I would leave evidence behind. Not to shame them, but to remind them that the house they stand in was built by someone who bled in silence so they could laugh loudly. I took a photo of the gate. Just one, then whispered, "You don't get to rename what you didn't carry." Have you ever watched someone steal your story and tell it like it was theirs? Tell me, dear, would you speak up or let silence defend you? Leave your thoughts below and share this if you've ever been quietly erased. The library still smelled the same, dust and lemons, like old paper mixed with someone's good intentions. I hadn't been back in years. Not since the summer Jude asked me what a microfiche was and then forgot the answer 10 minutes later. I headed to the archives, the back corner where time felt slower, where stories were pressed into silence and still waited to be read. "Can I help you find something, ma'am?" A young man asked. His name tag said Kyle. He couldn't have been older than 25. "I'm looking for issues of the Ashwood Register," I said. "Late 90s, education section." He led me to a drawer, pulled it out gently, like it held bones. "Here we go." He stepped back. I flipped through reel after reel until I found it. May 3rd, 1998, a black and white photo, Erica holding a giant check for her college scholarship, and me, standing beside her in a floral dress, my hand on her shoulder, my name spelled out in the caption, Mildred Hargrove, mother of the recipient. I stared at it for a long time. That photo was printed, cataloged, archived. They couldn't erase that. She could reframe stories on Instagram, pretend Tom's mother taught her to cook, call their holiday just as 4, but here, in ink and cellulose, I was still her mother, still visible. I printed 2 copies, folded one into my bag, left the other on the desk under the heading Duplicate Archive. The librarian didn't ask questions. He just smiled. "Want anything else?" "No," I said, "but thank you." Outside, the wind tugged at my coat. The street looked smaller than I remembered. The people younger, but I felt taller, like I'd gathered pieces of myself they forgot to take. Back in the room above the law office, I laid out the photo, David's letter, the voided will, and the list of transactions. One by one, I slid them into a manila folder and labeled it with a pen legacy unaudited. Then I picked up the phone and dialed the number I hadn't called in a decade, Florence City Records. A voice answered. "Hi," I said. "This is Mildred Hargrove. I'd like to schedule an appointment to discuss a family archive and future designation."
"Sure. Are you donating papers?" I paused.
"No," I said. "I'm reclaiming them." She hesitated, then said, "Well, that's a first. How's Tuesday at 10? "Perfect." I hung up and looked out the window. The lights across the street blinked on. Soft gold in the gray. I didn't need them to remember me. Not yet. I just needed to make sure history wouldn't forget I was ever here. The records office in Florence was smaller than I remembered. Just 2 desks, a coffee machine, and a wall of locked drawers holding the evidence of 1,000 quiet lives. The woman behind the counter, Mara, smiled as I walked in. "Mrs. Hargrove, yes. Thank you for seeing me." She gestured toward a side room, lined with display cases and plastic bins. "Most people bring boxes," she said.
I lifted my folder.
"I just brought what matters." We sat at a small round table. No computers, just a notebook and a mug of tea that smelled like apples and cloves. "I want to donate these," I said. I pulled out 3 letters from David, written while he was stationed in Korea, one about the cold, one about missing Erica's birth, and one about coming home to a house filled with things he didn't deserve, and a wife who forgave anyway. Mara read quietly, her fingers tracing the folds in the paper. "These are powerful," she whispered.
"Would be honored."
I nodded. "But there's one condition." She looked up. "I want the collection to be listed under both our names, David and Mildred Hargrove, and if it's ever displayed," his words, my name, side by side. Mara didn't hesitate. "Done." There was no parade, no press release. But I walked out of that building with a receipt in my hand and a strange stillness in my chest. My name was back on the shelf. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's backup plan, but as someone who mattered. Later that day, back at the office, a draft from my lawyer waited in my inbox. I opened it slowly. The new will. Executor Thomas G. Weller, David's old friend. Primary charitable clause. If the house is sold, a portion shall fund a reading room under the name the David and Mildred Hargrove Quiet Story Foundation. No drama, no revenge. Just a footnote in history they couldn't rewrite. I added one more clause. My handwriting was shaky, but firm. Personal effects shall be distributed at the discretion of the executor, not based on bloodline, but on memory. Because in the end, not everyone who shares your name has earned a piece of your story. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes. There were still things I'd lost. Christmas dinner, a stocking with my name on it, the weight of Jude's head on my shoulder after too much hot cocoa. But there were things they hadn't taken. My voice, my will, my proof, and now my name, ink somewhere they couldn't delete. The message came while I was folding laundry. A plain envelope slid beneath the door upstairs, no return address, just my name, typed centered, inside a copy of a listing agreement, my house, on the market, $61,212,000 asking. My breath held itself. I sat down on the edge of the bed, half a pillowcase still crumpled in my lap. There it was, Erica's name, signed beside mine. Or rather, beside the copy of mine from that old joint ownership form we'd filled out after David passed. I remembered the day clearly. The funeral was 3 days prior. She'd said, "Let's just keep the paperwork simple, Mom. It'll protect both of us?" I'd nodded. My fingers were still shaking from writing his eulogy. I never thought to revisit what I signed, but apparently she did. The agent's name looked familiar. Tom's cousin, of course, and the showing date, next week. I stood up, moved through the room like my body knew what to do before my mind caught up. Downstairs, I opened the cabinet where I kept my tax files. Section 4, Ownership and Titles. I flipped through the manila folders until I found it. The original deed, still in my name, still valid. The joint agreement Erica added, temporary revocable, meant for health reasons, in case of emergency. This wasn't an emergency, unless you counted betrayal as something to triage. I scanned the page. One line stood out. Authority may be revoked at owner's sole discretion without prior notice. I grabbed a pen. Signed the revocation form I'd printed last week but hadn't dared use. Until now, I slid it into an envelope. Addressed it to the listing agent. Certified mail, no drama, no fight. Just precision. Then I picked up the phone and left one voicemail. "Hi, this is Mildred Hargrove. Effective immediately, I revoke all real estate power of attorney previously granted to Erica T. Hargrove. Any transaction made under that authority is unauthorized. Please confirm receipt. I ended the call and sat very still. Outside, a bird pecked at the snow. Ordinary? Innocent? Unaffected. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was done. Done hoping. Done pleading. They wanted the house. Let them come for it. But they'd have to fight a woman who had filed every receipt, photocopied every signature, and now carried nothing but clarity in her spine. That night, I tucked the revocation receipt into the folder labeled. They thought I wouldn't notice. Then I turned off my phone, not to escape, but to rest. Because in the morning, I had one more visit to make. The house looked smaller than I remembered, white siding peeling at the corners. The mailbox still rusted. Even the garden bed, once Erica's favorite spot to dig for worms, was dry, scattered with brittle leaves. I hadn't been back in over a year. Not since Jude's last birthday. Back when they still remembered to say thank you without prompting, I knocked twice. The sound echoed like it didn't belong anymore. The door opened. Mildred. Darla blinked, holding a dish towel, flour smudged on her cheek. Hey, hon, I said. Hope it's not too early. She stepped aside without question. It's never too early for you. Come in. You want coffee? I nodded. We sat in the same kitchen we used to bake cookies in for school fundraisers. Back when Erica and Darla's daughter used to choreograph dance routines in the driveway like they had all the time in the world. Darla poured the coffee, then paused. You okay? I took a cold her. Not everything. Just enough. How Erica listed the house, how I caught it in time, how I was done pretending. Darla listened quietly, nodding, eye sharp. After a moment, she set down her cup. You know, she said, I thought it was odd, back in November. Erica stopped by. My back stiffened. She said she was looking into early property transfers. Asked if I remembered which lawyer helped your husband with the estate. Said she wanted to simplify things before the holidays. My hands went cold. November. That was before the Christmas text. Before the trip. Before I even packed the fleece blankets for the kids. She already knew she was leaving me out, I whispered. Darla leaned forward. She didn't slip, Mildred. She planned it. The whole thing. I didn't cry. Not in front of the woman who watched me raise Erica on secondhand sweaters and tuna casseroles. Instead, I asked, do you still have that spare key I gave you? The one hidden in the rose pot? She looked startled, then stood, came back with a tiny metal box, dusty but intact. I never used it, she said. I figured you'd want it back when the time was right. I took it, held it in my palm like it still had warmth from the past.
Thank you,
I said. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. Outside, the wind had picked up. Dry leaves swirled at my feet as I walked back to the car. The key pressed against my palm. Familiar, heavy. Not because of the metal, but because of what it unlocked. Not just a door, but the truth she hadn't just pushed me out. She had started erasing me long before I ever noticed the cold. The spare key slid into the lock without resistance. It turned smoothly, as if the house had been waiting. I stepped inside quiet. No perfume. No cinnamon candles, just the faint, stale scent of a place no longer mine. I didn't turn on the lights. Let the sun do its part through the living room curtains. The floor creaked. Same boards David used to curse whenever he tried to sneak a midnight snack and woke the baby. I moved slowly, familiar steps, through the hall, past the coat rack, to the study. They hadn't changed much, same bookshelf. Same ugly lamp Erica said was too grandma to keep but somehow never got rid of. I knelt at the bottom drawer, the one she never touched, too full of boring stuff she used to say inside a shoebox, faded blue, labeled in David's handwriting, M for when it matters. I sat on the carpet, the same one where Jude once spilled his grape juice, and I scrubbed for hours while Erica cried upstairs over college rejection letters. I opened the box, top layer, a copy of the land deed. My name, signed July 1978. Beneath it, David's honorable discharge papers, the flag-folded letter he never framed. Then, a photo. Black and white Erica, age 7, holding a spelling bee trophy, me kneeling beside her. The headline, Local Girl Wins State Credits Mom's Dictionary Drills. She used to love that photo, until she stopped remembering who held the camera. At the very bottom, a sealed envelope, unmarked. I opened it. Inside, a letter from David, undated. If you're here, it's because something's gone wrong. But Mildred, listen to me. You are not a footnote. You are the title page, the spine, the glue. I folded the letter, held it to my chest, then placed everything into my own folder, labeled it, Correction copy. I left the box exactly as I found it. No signs of tampering, no fingerprints. Just one last glance at the room. The same room where I once read bedtime stories until my voice cracked and the light stayed off because no one wanted the ending to come too soon. I stepped out, closed the door behind me, locked it, slid the key back into the rose pot. As I walked away, the weight in my bag felt right. Not heavy, not stolen. Just reclaimed. The message came just past midnight. No greeting, no punctuation. You still think it's your story? I stared at the screen. The words glowed like a cigarette in the dark, brief. Smug, stinking of assumption. I didn't reply. Instead, I set the phone down, turned off the lamp, and lay back against the pillow. Let the silence settle. Let it speak for me. Because the thing is, she wasn't entirely wrong. For years, I didn't think it was mine either. I gave it away in pieces, in casseroles and checkbooks, in bedtime favors and second chances. And somewhere along the way, I mistook sacrifice for erasure. But not anymore. The next morning, I called Thomas Weller. His voice was crisp, even at 7:15. "Morning, Mildred. What's on your mind?" "I want to schedule a full beneficiary review," I said. "Retirement accounts? Life insurance? Anything I missed." He didn't ask why. He'd stopped asking since Chapter 2 of this mess began. We scheduled it for Friday. Before we hung up, he said, "You want coffee waiting or tea?" I smiled. Chamomile, but strong. I hung up and exhaled. One more name to remove. One more door to close gently without slamming. I opened the closet and took down the small fireproof safe. Inside a single blue folder, marked Fidelity Final. I opened it. It held the last account David set up before he died. We called it the Florence Fund. We were going to use it to buy a tiny cottage by the coast. Write stories. Adopt a senior dog. He passed before we got there. I never touched the fund. Let it grow. Just in case one of the grandkids wanted college later. But now I saw it clearly. It had become a safety net not for them, but for me. The only place where my name still stood alone. No joint signers. No, just in case access. Just me. But if anything happened, the fund would go to Erica. By default. Unless I changed it, so I would. Not to punish, but to restore balance. Because the only thing worse than betrayal is rewarding it with permanence. I slid the folder into my tote, sat down at the kitchen table, and wrote one sentence in my planner. Remove shadow from legacy. Then I poured myself a second cup of coffee. Watched the birds land on the rail outside. One pecked at a crumb. The others waited patient. It reminded me of something David once said, while we watched Erica play soccer in middle school. Some folks only learn to fly after you stop carrying them. Thomas looked up from the screen. His office was quiet, too quiet for what I was about to say. We'd just gone over the forms, the new beneficiary designations, the updated will, all signed, all clean. He tapped the final line of the Fidelity account. "This one's untouched," he said. "You still want Erica listed as secondary?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked out the window. The courthouse clock tower blinked tunfunder too. Across the street, a couple argued over a stroller that didn't fold right. "I used to believe in generational grace," I said. "That if I poured enough good forward, someone would carry it with care." Thomas sat back, waited. I turned to him, met his eyes. "But what happens when the one you trusted takes the cup you filled and uses it to water weeds?" He didn't respond. "Didn't have to. Remove her," I said, simple. "Even. Final." He hesitated just long enough to let the weight of the moment land. "Understood." He tapped a few keys. The screen refreshed. Erica's name vanished, replaced with "to be held in trust, per instructions." No one else would see that line. But I knew what it meant. It meant the last door had closed. The last soft place was no longer hers. Not because I didn't love her, but because I finally loved myself more. He slid the confirmation page across the table. I signed. Initialed. Dated. When I handed the pen back, he looked at me gently. "Anything else?" "Mildred?" I folded the papers. Placed them in my tote, then said, "She taught me how far someone will go when they think your love is infinite." Today, I showed her it's not. And with that, I stood, walked out into the sharp winter air. My name was mine again. My story, unedited. And for the first time in years, the silence around me wasn't loneliness, it was peace. Have you ever erased someone from your legacy? Not out of anger, but out of truth. Would you do what Mildred did, or would you leave the door open? Comment below. Your voice matters more than silence ever could. The call came at 4:13 p.m. I was peeling carrots, the kind with dirt still clinging to the roots, just the way Lainey used to love, back when she called it crunchy earth candy. The screen lit up. Lainey FaceTime, I froze, my hand still damp. The peeler in my palm like a question, I answered. Her face filled the screen, older, freckles lighter, that same gap-toothed grin, just one tooth now gone for good. Hi, Grandma. My throat clenched, but I smiled. Hey, sweetheart. She looked around as if someone might hear. Then whispered, Mom thinks I'm on a math app. I almost laughed. Almost. How are you? I asked. She shrugged. Fine. But why didn't you call us back? Mom said you were at the hospital, that you're tired and need quiet all the time. My smile held, but something inside me cracked.
I'm not sick, Lainey.
Her eyes widened. But Mom said. I cut gently. I know what she said. But I want you to hear me from me. I leaned closer to the screen. Sometimes grown-ups tell stories that make themselves feel better, even if it makes others feel small. She looked down, picked at the corner of a book cover. There was a silence. Not awkward, just weighty. Then she looked up again. I missed you. 3 words. Soft, ungoverned. Free, I exhaled slowly. I missed you too, little one. She shifted the camera and I saw her room, a new one. Not the one I remembered. No handmade quilt, no photo of her and me in the pumpkin patch. Nothing I recognized. Do you still have the bear I gave you? I asked. Mitza, Pickles? She brightened.
Oh, yeah.
He's in my closet. Mom says he's dusty. I chuckled. Dusty things are often the ones that remember best. She grinned. Hey, Grandma. She leaned closer to the screen again. What did your house smell like? I forget. I didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Instead, I closed my eyes. Cinnamon and lemon and a little bit like books. And sometimes, when the windows were open, like hope, she smiled wide. Then the sound of footsteps. I gotta go. Mom'll freak. I understand. She looked straight into the screen. Will you call again? I didn't promise. Didn't lie. I just said, I'll be right here when you're ready. And then she was gone. After the call, I sat in the stillness. Let it settle in the corners of the room, between the ticking clock and the scent of carrot peels. Lainey's voice still lingered, light, uncertain, real. I walked to the cabinet by the stairs, pulled out the small wooden box David had built for Erica's wedding cards that were never sent. It had a loose hinge, wobbled slightly when opened. Inside, old photos, a dried tulip, one of Lainey's stick figure drawings, a woman with long curly hair and a speech bubble that read, Grandma says I'm made of starlight. I smiled. That day, she'd spilled lemonade all over the kitchen and cried like the world had ended. I told her, sweetheart, even stars make messes before they shine. She repeated it for weeks, until Erica rolled her eyes and told her not to be so dramatic. I pulled out a clean sheet of paper, cream-colored, slightly textured, and began to write. My dearest Lainey, if you're reading this, it means you've gone looking. Which means you remember? Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to wonder why the house smelled like cinnamon, why there were always hard candies in the green jar, why no one talked about the Christmas that wasn't. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I started loving myself again. And sometimes, those two things live in different houses. You were never the reason for the silence. You were the pause that made me wish I could start over. I hope you still draw. I hope you still ask strange questions. And I hope no one ever tells you that softness makes you weak. It doesn't. Softness is what held this family together long after the glue wore off. If someday you want to find me, don't look for perfect answers. Look for scent, and quilts, and lemon cookies that burn just a little at the edges. I'll be there, always. Love, Grandma M. I folded the letter, tucked it into a smaller envelope and labeled it, for her when she's ready. Then I opened the file box beside the bed, pulled out the legacy folder, slid the envelope in carefully between David's final draft of our travel plans and the faded photo of our first home. I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I simply felt placed, like something had finally landed after drifting too long in wind. The room was small, no more than 20 chairs, some already filled with folks nursing coffee in paper cups and clutching library pens. The Florence Community Reading Circle. Monthly low turnout. High heart. I'd never spoken at one before. Always sat in the back, tucked between nonfiction and forgotten coats. But this time, Mara asked me, We're doing letters from the past? She'd said. You have one? David's. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure my voice could carry that far anymore. Still, I said yes. So here I was, in a cardigan that smelled like cedar, holding the same page David had written with a leaky pen and steady hand. Mara tapped the mic. Tonight, We're honored to hear from Mrs. Mildred Hargrove, who's brought us a letter from her late husband, a man who served, who loved, and who left behind more than just a name. I walked slowly to the podium. My knees ached, but my spine held. I unfolded the letter, took a breath, and read. If you're reading this, you've already given too much to people who forgot how to say thank you. You are not invisible. You are the spine of the story, the part that holds without being read aloud. Rewrite everything. Don't leave crumbs. I paused. Let the words settle. A woman in the front row wiped her cheek. A man in the back shifted, as if something in him cracked just enough to let light in. Then came the question. Soft, almost whispered, from a girl no older than 20. Were you the person in the letter? The one he meant. I looked at her. Looked at all of them. For a long time I would have said no. Would have pointed to someone else. To David. To Erica. To anyone with louder stories. But now I stood taller. I said, once I let others tell my story in footnotes and margins. But not anymore. The room didn't applaud. Didn't need to. They just nodded. Listened. Because something sacred happens when a woman tells the truth, not to explain, but to claim. The crowd trickled out slowly. Some lingered near the tea table. Others drifted toward the shelves, half reading spines they wouldn't borrow. I stayed back, folding David's letter with care as if pressing it into memory again. That's when she approached. A woman about my age, silver hair swept up, lips painted a confident burgundy, but her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her coat. You read it like you've held silence too long, she said. I smiled. There was a time I forgot I had volume. She looked down, then back at me. Can I ask you something? Of course. She hesitated. Did you ever think it was too late? To begin again, I mean. The question didn't surprise me, but the way she asked, like she was holding back 100 other versions of it, that did. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled a slip of paper from my purse, wrote down my address, slid it into her hand. Come by, I said. Nothing fancy, just soup and warmth. But the tables finally got space again. Her eyes softened, she nodded once, held the paper like it weighed more than it did. Later that evening, she knocked at the door, carrying nothing but a small pie in a foil tin and a scarf that smelled faintly of lavender. I let her in, led her to the kitchen, set out 2 bowls, 2 spoons, and the linen napkins I hadn't used since the last Christmas I was invited to. We ate slowly, no background music, just the occasional clink of spoon to ceramic. She told me her name was Jean, that her son hadn't spoken to her since she sold his comic books after her stroke. I needed room for my walker, she said, and I thought, he's 35. He wouldn't care. He did, but not for the reason she hoped. We didn't swap pain like war stories, we just shared air. 2 women, sitting in the soft light of a house that had once echoed with other people's needs. She took second helpings. I poured more tea. At one point, she touched the edge of her bowl and whispered, I forgot what dinner with someone feels like. I didn't say anything, just reached for the candle in the middle of the table. Lit it, let the flame flicker between us. Small, warm enough. That night, when I washed the dishes, I didn't feel like I was tidying up after absence. I felt hosted, as if by setting one more place, I'd set something inside myself right too. The phone rang on a Wednesday. Not the cell. The landline. The one I almost unplugged last spring when no one called but telemarketers and ghosts. I picked it up after the second ring. Didn't check the caller ID. Didn't need to. Hi. Mom. 3 syllables, flat, measured. I waited. Erica cleared her throat. I saw the new papers. Thomas emailed the updates. Silence. Then, I didn't know you were making changes. I just thought we could maybe talk about it. I sat at the table. The one where she'd once said, You really don't need to keep everything. It's just stuff. I traced the edge of my teacup. You changed the will, she said, and the account, and the house title. I'm wondering if any of that is final, or if you'd consider rewriting some of it. I smiled. Not out of spite, but out of recognition. There it was, the ask. Dressed in politeness but built from habit. She thought this was still her story to revise. I used to think. I began everything important had to be written in ink. Filed. Notarized. Witnessed. She didn't interrupt, but now I know. I paused, watching the steam rise from the cup. Some of the most permanent things in this world are never put on paper. A beat of silence. I didn't mean to hurt you, she offered, the way people say, bless you, to cover a sneeze they caused. I let it sit. You know, I said, when I was a girl. My mother told me that memory isn't about what stays. It's about what refuses to leave, she sighed, soft like a door closing 2 rooms away. So is that a no? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for the folder on the table, Legacy Unedited, ran my hand over the flap, felt the pressure of every sealed word inside. There are things I've rewritten, I said. But not with pens. A breath on the line. Then quiet. She didn't say goodbye. Just hung up. No click, no closure. Just the hum of space. I placed the phone back in its cradle. Turned toward the kitchen. The soup had started to boil. I stirred it gently. Tonight, Jen was coming over again. She was bringing that fig bread she swore tasted better on the second day. I set out 2 bowls, then paused, opened the drawer, and pulled out a third. Just in case. It came in the mail, no return address, just neat block letters on the envelope. Toy Grandma M from L. I opened it slowly. The paper was pink, lined with 3 stickers at the top, a cat, a star, and a badly peeled corner that used to be a moon. Inside, the handwriting wobbled. But it was hers. Dear Grandma, I remembered. Your house smells like cinnamon and lemon and books. I smelled it in a dream. It made me cry, but not the bad kind. The kind like when a song ends but stays in your head. Mom says I should forget about old things, but I don't want to. I think old things remember me back. I miss you. And I love Mr. Pickles. He still squeaks. Love, Lainey. I folded the letter with both hands. Pressed it to my chest. There were no demands, no questions. Just one child reaching toward a scent as if it were a lighthouse. I walked upstairs, opened the cedar trunk, pulled out the box, Legacy for her. Inside, the photo from the spelling bee. The drawing she made, David's letter, my own, sealed, and now. Lainey's. I added one more item, the tea towel she once spilled cocoa on. Still stained, still soft. I closed the box, wrapped it in brown paper, wrote her full name on top, but not her address. She wasn't ready yet, but she would be, and when she was, this would find her. I walked to the post office. The clerk asked, anything fragile? I smiled. Only memory? She weighed the package, stamped the label. It's going to take a little while, she warned. That's okay, I said. She's worth the wait. Outside, the air was cold but didn't bite. I stood for a moment, watching a child across the street chase a leaf like it was something important. Maybe it was. I didn't need to be remembered by everyone. I didn't need statues or holidays. I just needed one girl to know that she came from something that refused to disappear. I walked home, put the kettle on, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a story someone else stopped reading. I felt like the author. I'm no longer a legacy taken from. I'm the one who leaves it behind. Some endings don't announce themselves. They don't slam doors or scream across phone lines. Sometimes, they come quietly, in a handwritten letter from a child who remembers the smell of your house. That was how I knew my story had truly shifted. Not because Erica apologized, she didn't. Not because the law confirmed what was mine, though it did. But because a girl with a heart too big for the world's small rules sent me a pink page that simply said, I remembered. I used to think legacy was made of paperwork, wills, deeds, insurance forms, all notarized and filed. But that was before I realized the deepest kind of legacy doesn't need signatures. It needs witnesses. For years I was the invisible witness in my own life. I watched, held space, let others take and reshape what I gave freely. Erica didn't steal from me, not in the conventional sense. She didn't break into my bank account or raid the safe. She just stopped saying my name when she told the stories that were built on my back. She taught my lessons, but gave credit to someone else. She raised her children in a home I built, then told them I was too tired, too sick, too distant to be remembered. That's a different kind of theft. The kind that doesn't bruise the skin, but leaves you aching in places no doctor can find. For a long time I thought confronting her meant anger. That if I didn't shout, I hadn't truly stood up for myself. But anger was never my language. My language was care. Record-keeping, recipes passed down with teaspoons of grace. Letters folded like bandages, so I spoke in that language instead. I didn't scream. I signed. I didn't accuse. I archived. I didn't demand. I documented. Because legacy for women like me has always been written in the margins. We are the ones who know where the birth certificates are kept, who remembered to save the report cards, who taught Sunday school, but were left out of the photo. We're told to let it go. Not make a fuss. Be grateful we were ever part of it. But silence isn't gratitude and absence isn't grace. So I decided, if they wouldn't tell my story, I'd write it myself. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but for truth. Because someday someone, a granddaughter, a stranger, a lonely woman in a small-town library, will be looking for herself in the past. And I want her to find me there, not as a cautionary tale, not as a footnote, but as proof that reclamation can come late and still be right on time. I didn't rewrite the will out of bitterness. I rewrote it because it no longer told the truth. The truth was, my daughter made choices, and so did I. She chose distance, I chose definition. She erased, I recorded. She assumed permanence. I remembered impermanence is exactly why we must be precise with memory. When I sent that box to Lainey, legacy for her, I didn't expect anything in return. I simply hoped that one day, when she was ready to ask where she came from and what parts of her were made of cinnamon, lemon, and books, she'd have an answer, a box, a letter, a thread. I've learned that healing, real healing, doesn't always come from apologies. It comes from stopping the cycle before it reaches the next generation, and it doesn't need a witness to count. But it helps when one finally looks up and says, I see you. Jean did that, Lainey did that, and quietly I did it too. I saw myself, saw the girl who stayed quiet so others could speak, the woman who gave up trips and dreams and holidays for people who now say, you're too much, or we never asked you to. They're right, they never asked. I offered, but offering doesn't mean surrender, and giving doesn't mean disappearing. I've made peace with not being invited, with birthdays missed, with traditions altered to exclude me. That pain, it doesn't own me anymore, because now I understand. I was never the guest, I was the table. And the moment I stopped showing up was the moment they realized what they'd built was wobbling. So if you're listening, maybe from a small apartment, or a nursing home, or a kitchen that smells a little like yesterday, hear me. It is not too late to unerase yourself. It is not too dramatic to say your name out loud, and it is never selfish to write your story down exactly as you lived it. Even if no one claps, even if no one comes back, even if the people who hurt you never say they're sorry, your memory matters, your witness matters, your name belongs in the story, and if they won't say it, you say it for them, you say it for you. Because in the end, I was not the legacy that got taken. I was the woman who chose to leave one behind.